Welcome to Zurich. Thank you. Pleasure having you here.
Thank you very much.
That's going to be yours. Welcome to Zurich, where we're going to see your film tonight. We have heard a lot about it, and we were going to talk a lot about the film. I've prepared a lot of questions, and I was thinking, you were doing so many interviews, and we were talking about these issues all the time. And I know you've been asked the same questions over and over again. So as a quick, as the first question, is there one question you don't ever want to answer again? And I'll skip it right from my script.
You don't have any questions about Donald Trump, do you?
Okay, there go 80% of my questions. I'm going to lie them there. Ooh, that's going to be a long hour, Mr. Go. Now let's talk about the film. As we can see in your back, we have the we have the film poster there. Why did you decide to do a sequel to The Inconvenient Truth?
Well, because two reasons. The main reason is there is still a need to convey this message to people around the world. We have made a tremendous amount of progress, but the climate crisis continues to worsen. And it seemed that the 10-year anniversary of the first movie was an appropriate time to ask the audience for permission to come back and say, here is what's new in the last 10 years. And there are two things that are very new. The first I've just mentioned, the crisis is worse. The extreme weather events that are related to the climate crisis have become far more frequent and far more severe. In my country, we have just had these extraordinary hurricanes that have had an intensity and an impact that is really off the charts. The phrase off the charts, let me define that briefly. Hurricane Harvey, which hit Houston, Texas last month, was a once in a 25,000-year event. So that qualifies as being off the normal charts we use to define our expectations of these kinds of tragedies. And I won't go through the list of others. There are all too many. The hottest year ever measured was last year. The second hottest was the year before. The third hottest was the year before that. 16 of the 17 hottest years have been since 2001. And so it's important to convey the message that we have to stop using the atmosphere of the Earth as an open sewer for the gaseous waste of our industrial civilization. The second thing that's new, though, that plays a very important role in this movie is that we have the solutions now. They have been developed far more quickly than anyone anticipated or even hoped. It's really quite extraordinary because in the world of technology, I have become used to being startled by the rapid pace of computers, for example, and you're familiar with the phenomenon known as Moore's Law, where computers get twice as powerful for the same money every 2 years, mobile phones, flat screen TVs. The good news is that solar panels and wind power and batteries and electric cars and thousands of efficiency improvements that are incredibly startling, technologies that are not as well known like LED lighting, they're going to completely take over the global lighting market within a handful of years. And
Everything becomes cheaper and smaller, right?
everything becomes cheaper and better and far more efficient. And as a result of that and actions that represent progress in the policy arena, such as the Paris Agreement, which you will also see in the movie, have for the first time stabilized global emissions. That's hardly good enough because we're stabilized now at a point where we're still putting 110 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into the atmosphere every 24 hours. And the accumulated amount that is up there now traps as much extra heat energy every day as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every day. And it's a big planet, but that's a lot of energy. And more than 90% is going into the oceans. We're seeing the progressive disruption of important global patterns in wind currents and ocean currents. And the sixth great extinction is now underway. Unfortunately, there is this parade of horribles, and it is important to continue delivering the message of why we have to make more rapid progress, while at the same time delivering the second message about what's new is we are beginning to make progress, but we need to make the progress faster still.
So obviously, there were many reasons to do a second film. However, I read somewhere that you were a little bit critical, skeptical, even reluctant to do a second one. How was that?
I was. To put that in context, I was skeptical about the idea of making the first movie 11 years ago because I did not really understand the level of skill these directors and producers have. And may I quickly add that the directors of this movie, Bonnie Cohen and John Schenck, really deserve all of the credit for this movie. They've done a spectacular job. But when the discussions about a sequel began several years ago, I once again did not understand that the skill of these new directors would be as high. I'm biased, but I think they've done a wonderful job. But when you have a very successful first movie, obviously people say, well, now let's just make another one. Oh, well, hold on a minute. Let's talk about that. But again, when it came to the 10-year anniversary, that seemed like a good marker to say, okay, here's what's new.
You spoke about the success of the first one, and it was actually proven that in the American society, the first one changed quite a bit in regards to where the problems of the climate change lie, also the responsibility of us regarding that problem. However, when we talk about sequels, we always talk about the success of the first film. That's why we have a second Spider-Man or a second Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever it is. Could it be said that your sequel is kind of a sign as well that the success hasn't been that well either, because people are still thinking that it is not quite an issue? You still have your climate change deniers as well.
No, well, I don't agree with that assessment, because public opinion really has changed all around the world, and even in my country. More than 2/3 of the American people are now on side. They understand that this is a crisis, it's man-made, we have to address it. And we are now making progress. And the Paris Agreement was a truly historic breakthrough. Here you have virtually every nation in the entire world agreeing to go to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by mid-century or as soon thereafter as possible. That is quite a breakthrough, really far exceeding what many thought would ever be possible. And if you look in the plans of individual countries. Just since this movie came out, since the Paris Agreement, India, for example, has done a complete U-turn. They've closed 37 coal mines this year. They're shutting down coal-burning plants. They are going all out to build solar installations. Electricity from both solar and wind is now significantly cheaper in India and China, and in a growing number of places in the world than electricity from burning coal. India just announced that within only 13 years, 100% of all their new cars and trucks must be electric vehicles. And we are seeing that same commitment made by Norway and Denmark even more quickly. Even Germany is now debating this change. The largest US manufacturer, General Motors, just announced it's going all electric by 2023. This is and the newspaper articles in the US said this is the death of the internal combustion and diesel engine technology. So we're really seeing 2/3 of all the new electricity generating capacity in the world last year was solar. I mean, this is really a dramatic change. It is still not fast enough because these consequences are growing in severity and frequency, as I've already said. So it's like a race between the congealing, the development of political will in the global political system and the onrushing crisis that we have caused with this heat-trapping pollution.
Speaking of the crisis, there's one telling sentence in the movie where you say, we're not talking about a climate crisis, we're talking about a democracy crisis here.
Yeah.
How do you mean that?
Well, we have seen in many countries, unfortunately the phenomenon is most pronounced in the US, a phenomena you might call policy capture by special interests and lobbyists who have found ways to use the legacy, wealth, and power built up over the last century and a half in which we've become so dependent on fossil fuels to manipulate the political system. This is much less pronounced in Switzerland. You have very good policies under development here. But at the national level in my country, we have still the appointment of people to run the Environmental Protection Agency who are completely opposed to the Environmental Protection Agency.
Who don't believe in climate change.
Who don't believe in climate change, yes, that's right. But even in the US, we are seeing our largest states are now moving forward without the federal government. Individual cities are making a commitment to go to 100% renewable energy. This is discussed in the movie, and it's a very heartening trend. We see most of our largest businesses making a commitment to go to 100% renewable energy and to make the other changes that bring solutions to the climate crisis. Why? Because they hear this from their consumers, their customers. They hear it from their employees. They hear it from their own executive teams. They hear it from their families. And when they go out to try to hire new employees for their companies, you know, this younger generation is not only different from my generation, they're way different from my generation. They want to work for a company that pays them a good salary, yes, of course, but they do not want to work for a company that doesn't share their values and make them feel as if they are part of something larger than just the profit motive. And companies all around the world are under growing pressure, and some of them are doing it without the pressure. They have the conscience and they see the reality of the crisis. Let me also add, they also see, as do others, the opportunity that is built into the response to this crisis. Again, I use my own country as an example. Jobs in the solar industry in the US are growing 17 times faster than other jobs in the economy. The single fastest growing job is wind turbine technician. The number of jobs in the solar industry is already twice as large as the coal and oil industry. So this is, and investing in these solutions creates more jobs still.
Those are hopeful signs from your country. Some might argue there are a little bit less hopeful signs, and that brings me dangerously close to some of the questions I'm not allowed to ask. You were talking about the Paris Agreement, and that's, that takes a big part of the film as well, and the fight for of the world community to bring it through.
Yeah.
It has been hailed as a huge success.
Yeah.
Of course, we all know the United States want to bail out, want to get out of the agreement. By now, they're with Syria, the only country not taking part in that agreement, since Nicaragua chose to to join in as well. How does that make you feel as an American?
How does it make me feel? Well, I worried a great deal that President Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement would have very negative consequences, that it would cause other nations to also withdraw. But the day after his announcement, every other nation in the world spoke up and said, we're still in the Paris Agreement. This has nothing to do with us. California, New York, all these other state governments in the US said, oh, we're still in the agreement. All these cities and companies said, no, we're still in the agreement. So it is now important to make a very clear and sharp distinction between President Donald Trump on the one hand, and the United States of America on the other hand.
You said it yourself, there's even a movement we're still in, where a lot of American communities, states are taking part.
We're still in, and then there's this hashtag, we got this. We got this.
And it has to be said, it takes 3 to 4 years until this can be made.
Well,
so
there is that point. The agreement was very carefully written, and technically, the first date upon which his withdrawal could take legal effect is the day after the next presidential election.
Yeah. But still, you said you're not worried that other countries might follow. There has been one case, Turkey, of course, that said we might follow as well. Does that worry you that other countries might take it as a political token as well, that the agreement might be used or abused?
No, I don't think so, and I think in the end Turkey will also remain the momentum that is embedded in the agreement is now part of business decisions, industry decisions, investor decisions, political decisions at the local, state, regional level. It's part of our culture now. Anyone who deals with the climate crisis has to make efforts to understand climate denial, which is an odd and highly negative phenomena. And we don't have time to go through all the dimensions of it, but one of them has been what the psychologists refer to as system justification, and it's a gobbledygook term, but basically what it means is that we as human beings have an inherent need to feel that the large systems within which we live our lives are basically okay. And if someone comes into the room with his hair on fire and says, everything has to change, then the natural human tendency is to say, calm down, calm down. Things are basically all right. one of the consequences of the Paris Agreement is that all of the systems in which we live our lives now have already committed themselves to this change. So if you are one of the diminishing number of climate deniers, you are the one with hair on fire. You are now the one challenging the consensus, challenging what humanity as a whole has decided is in our best interest. We are moving. We are going to solve this crisis. The only remaining question is, will we solve it quickly enough to avoid crossing some of the tripwires, sometimes called tipping points, that give us, that run the risk of setting in motion changes that could spin out of our control. I am very confident that we are still well within the time frame that we can do this in time. There are some distinguished climate scientists here, by the way, Connie Steffen and his new wife, Bianca Perrin, I joined in celebrating their wedding yesterday, are really distinguished climate scientists. And Thomas Stocker and his wife Leticia, they are among the great global experts on this crisis. I learned from them. I don't even play a scientist on television. I just channel the knowledge that they very patiently put in simple enough terms for me to understand. And since they're good friends, they go over it over and over and over again. And when I can understand it, I feel as if I can communicate it. And so when I tell you, I think that we are still definitely able to avoid these tipping points, it comes from the overwhelming consensus of the scientific community.
And you are, it has to be said, still quite optimistic. And I mean, there's that famous quote by a former Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, when the SDG goals were released 2 years ago. The sustainable goals, which have a lot to do with climate change as well. He said we might be the last generation who can actually overcome poverty, can overcome problems.
Right.
But we're the first ones to do that, but we're the last to be able to save the planet.
We're the
at
first
the same time.
we're the first to feel the consequences, and the last to be able to solve the crisis.
But isn't that a huge responsibility for most of us?
Yes, it is. And this is also a burden that some people would like to push away, of course, because when you ask the generation of people alive today to maintain an awareness of the consequences of their present actions for generations yet to come, that is asking a lot. Human nature is so complex, and all of us are capable of a wide range of actions and reactions. But we do have the capacity to rise above our limitations. There have been those times in history when humanity has risen to the challenge of creating a better future. After World War II, General George Marshall, who became Secretary of State, author of the Marshall Plan, he said, now is the time for us to steer by the stars and not by the lights of each passing ship. This is, again, such a time, because the consequences of what we do now in these next few years are unbelievably consequential, not only for the rest of our lives, not only for our children, but for all of the generations to come. Again, that's a big thought, one that's uncomfortable to hold in one's awareness. But again, we're capable of doing that. And you asked at the beginning, why put out another movie? Well, that's the reason, to try to refresh that awareness of just how important these decisions that lie immediately before us really are.
It's a big thought, you say it yourself, and for some people it's an uncomfortable thought. And
Yeah.
there my
An inconvenient thought.
An inconvenient thought, exactly. And there might lie the reasons for the sometimes very aggressive critics and sometimes very aggressive tones that you have to endure from day to day. I guess with social media it has become harder in the last 10 years. There have been some articles about when you Google climate change at the moment, there are more
fake news.
More exactly with the whole fake news. There are more deniers than. How do you deal with that? That it's apparently the deniers are getting more aggressive, maybe also more.
No, I think they're getting more aggressive because they're losing. Their numbers are diminishing. You talk about the burden of holding this big thought that we will shape the future of humanity. Just think for a moment about the burden these climate deniers have to carry. It's getting very much harder for them.
You almost feel sorry for them.
No, I'm not there yet, but it is a burden. It is a burden, and they are a phenomena most pronounced in my country. But you have those making efforts, even here in beautiful Switzerland. And you see it in Australia, you see a little bit of it in the UK, but it's most pronounced in the United States. And you know, in the southern part of the US where I live, there's an old saying that if you see a turtle on top of a fence post, you can be pretty certain that it didn't get there by itself. And when you see these high levels of climate denial in the US, similarly, you can be pretty sure that didn't happen spontaneously. There have been elaborate, well-documented studies of this phenomenon. There's a famous book called The Merchants of Doubt by a historian of science at Harvard University, Naomi Oreskes, and her co-author, Mark Conway. They have traced this in great detail. What happened is the large carbon polluters actually adopted the blueprint, the playbook of the tobacco industry. You will recall, as most know, when the doctors and scientists established the absolute linkage between smoking cigarettes and lung cancer and other diseases, the tobacco companies hired actors and dressed them up as doctors and put them in front of cameras and teleprompters to say, "Hi, I'm a doctor, and there are no health problems at all related to smoking cigarettes." And they devoted enormous sums of money to running TV and radio and magazine and newspaper ads. You can Google these ads now. They are so ridiculous. You have these actors dressed as doctors smoking cigarettes. "Hi, doctor, want a cigarette?" "Yeah." "What brand do you smoke?" And there are hundreds of these old commercials online. So the carbon polluters adopted that blueprint. They hired many of the same public relations specialists. If you believe in karma, you have to wonder what their karmic debt is. Because on the tobacco side, 100 million people died unnecessarily. 100 million deaths on their consciences. And now they have financed lavishly this major global cottage industry of climate denial, where they have these pretend scientists or some outliers from some other completely different field. And not all, but many of them are taking money from the large carbon polluters. And 100 years ago, a famous investigative journalist in the US, Upton Sinclair, wrote, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something if his salary depends upon him not understanding it."
Okay. But It's an interesting point, because that leads me to the next question. I mean, do you ever get frustrated that these people who you are talking about right now might not come into the movie theater and watch that film? I mean, isn't there a risk that, like here, for example, or tonight, that you might just preach to the one who don't need convincing anymore? Do you reach the ones who are actually denying those problems?
We are reaching them, and the evidence shows that we are. The first movie did, and this one is doing so as well. And you have to keep trying. Now, some of the deniers are simply never going to come on side. I say never, maybe, but I don't waste a lot of time with some of them because they're reading from an internal teleprompter, and they give you the impression that they really do not want to engage sincerely. But there are some of them who actually are changing now. I had I'll give you an example. I was walking on a public street outside an airport in the U.S., and a man came up to me and introduced himself. He said, "I'd like to talk to you." His name is Jerry Taylor. He worked for 20 years for one of the right-wing think tanks in the U.S. devoted to climate denial, and he was the person in charge of distributing the climate denial for that organization. And he said, "I want you to know you've convinced me. I have changed my mind. How can I help you?" And he's not in the movie. We did film him after this conversation, but he has spoken at conferences that I've organized, and he's very. It's very educational to listen to him describe the internal workings of these climate denier groups. So even a person who you would think would be the least likely to change has the capacity to change.
So I reckon these people give you hope in your mission, so to speak, that you've been working for that for 30, 40 years already. As we know, you've been vice president for 8 years. You've been that close to the White House. I read. I didn't want to open that box there too much, but there's a famous quote. Tell me if it's wrong or not. Apparently you introduced yourself once. "Hi, I'm Al Gore. I
used to be the next president of the United States."
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when I was watching that film and having seen the first film, did it ever occur to you that you might have changed the world more by not becoming U.S. president than if you had?
Well, I'm actually under no illusions that there's any position in the world with as much potential for bringing positive change as the position of president of the U.S. So, no, I've never thought that. But I'm very grateful to have found other ways to try to bring positive change in the world. And it is really a source of joy for me personally to have work that seems to justify pouring every ounce of energy I have into it. It's really a privilege to have a task to perform that really makes you feel like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Life had a different plan for me, you say in the film.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah. As I say in the movie, I had a detailed plan for my life, but life had a different plan for me. So, you just pick yourself up and move on.
You move on, and you move on all the time. Do you ever get tired? Do you ever get tired of the criticism? I mean, you're always so calm, also in the movie. I mean, is that part of who you are, or did you have to learn that? Or do you ever get angry? Do you ever hit your fist on the table and are just like plain angrily mad? Exactly like this.
Yeah. Well, I guess that part of that is
stoicism, or is it just your?
It's maybe part of it is my temperament, but surely part of it is something that I have learned. Winston Churchill once said of the American people, they generally do the right thing after first exhausting every available alternative. And I've more or less gone through that process. It doesn't, anger, yeah, I sometimes get angry, of course. And you'll see flashes of that in the movie, actually. But anger it should be used very sparingly, I think.
Don't get me wrong, I don't want you to get here. That wasn't the intention. But
it's very seldom the most appropriate response.
Citing Winston Churchill famously couldn't let go of politics until his late age. He just wanted to be a politician. When you're asked that question, you always give the same answer. You're a recovering politician, not wanting to get into that field too much anymore. How do you mean that? How big is the crave still? I mean, the Democratic Party is obviously looking for new candidates as well.
Another quote from Winston Churchill, when you talked about was it a good thing that I didn't become president. When he was a young man, he lost an election, and one of his friends said, Winston, that is a blessing in disguise. And he said, damn good disguise. And there are some things that I certainly miss about being in public service and being able to have a direct hands-on responsibility for policies and decision-making. But there's a lot that I don't miss. The political system in the U.S. has changed a lot. The influence of big money is really very destructive and debilitating now. I have hope that positive change is underway there. You referred earlier to fixing democracy in order to help solve the climate crisis. We had, in the presidential election last year, one of the least remarked upon developments was one of the other Democratic candidates, Bernie Sanders, regardless of whether you agree with his proposals or policies, he demonstrated that it is now possible with the internet to finance a very robust and potentially successful campaign without taking any money from lobbyists or big wealthy contributors, but relying instead solely on small contributions over the internet. And I think that is a very positive development. Another reason for the climate denial, a great German philosopher, Jürgen Habermas, wrote in the early 60s about the transformation of the structural transformation of the public sphere, and how the Enlightenment, which began here in Switzerland and neighboring Germany with the Gutenberg's printing press and Immanuel Kant's philosophy and all of the movements surrounding the Reformation and a more controversial movement, but the Enlightenment really came out of this new communications technology and information ecosystem that was developed at that time, where logic and reason and the best available evidence came to occupy a really important place in collective decision-making. And Habermas and his colleagues in the Frankfurt School, some of them, wrote about how the introduction of mass media and the development of culture machines actually served to diminish the role of reason in politics in many countries. One of his teachers, Theodor Adorno, wrote that the conversion of all questions of truth to questions of power attacks the very distinction between truth and falsehood. And sometimes the climate deniers and sometimes other parts of the political dialogue in my country seem to be bringing those prophecies into being. But just as the electronic mass media changed the information ecosystem in ways that suppress the role of reason, now the third revolution, the internet revolution, for all of its problems and with social media and fake news and the problems we've seen, nevertheless, the underlying impulse is to re-empower individuals to easily enter a public conversation in ways that give us as humans a new opportunity to once again elevate reason and the best available evidence as the basis for collective decision making. And you see that in the emergence of this new way of campaigning. So I actually think that we are on the verge of a potentially very positive restoration of the role of reason. It certainly doesn't feel that way right now, but if you stop and think of the robust reform movements that are alive and thriving on the internet now, particularly with young people getting involved in all kinds of very positive social movements, probably more manifest at the city level and the regional level now, but it's really beginning to pick up steam, and so I'm optimistic about it.
Well, we've certainly come full circle from Trump in the beginning to Habermas and Adorno and the School of Frankfurt. Three names I wouldn't have guessed being cited at the same time in one sentence. Before we give you the opportunity to ask a couple of questions as well, Mr. Vice President was so nice to take questions also from the audience. Let me just, final question on that point of reason. When you look at the world at the moment, one might argue it's not that reasonable because we have protectionism, we have populism, we have in different countries we had the Brexit, of course, as well. When you look at the state of the world at the moment, you said it yourself. There's reason to be optimist, and you are an optimist. How optimistic are you? Can you say it's like it's going to be good?
I am very optimistic. We've seen the largest reduction in poverty in human history. We've seen a general lifting of living standards. We've seen the numbers of people in the world living in abject hunger and poverty diminished. It's still a huge crisis, and right now in Africa, 20 million people are on the verge of starvation, the worst humanitarian crisis since 1945. But on a global basis, we should not miss the signs of real progress that have taken place. And of course, violence dominates in the news, but actually the levels of organized violence and deaths according to violence have also been sharply declining. Now, the two great challenges to our future. Number one is the ecological crisis. We have a collision between the way our civilization is presently organized and the surprisingly fragile ecological system of our planet, the most vulnerable part of which is the atmosphere, because it's so thin. So if you could drive a car at normal speed straight up in the sky, you get to the top of the breathable sky in 5 or 10 minutes. It's so thin. But the oceans are vulnerable. The plastic in the oceans, the overfishing, the wetlands are vulnerable, forests are vulnerable. We have a collision that has to be addressed. And the climate crisis in particular, if we did not address it, has the potential to end civilization as we know it. I'm optimistic. The second big challenge, of course, because we are beginning to solve it, but the second big challenge, of course, is the continuing threat of nuclear annihilation. And again, we've made great progress there, but now we see with North Korea and some other places calling the Iran agreement in question, the resolution of the North Korean crisis is very uncertain. So these are the two challenges that we have to face. But assuming that we do resolve them, yes, I'm extremely optimistic.
What a nice way to finish on a high note, I hope, as well, after the questions. We're going to take a couple of questions. If someone has... Let's go to the young lady in the... We have a microphone? Yes, please.
Good evening, Mr. Gore. I had to write down the question in case I'm a bit nervous. First of all, congratulations on earning the Nobel Peace Prize for your work in climate change activism, as well as winning 2 Academy Awards for An Inconvenient Truth. I was wondering, what are the biggest improvements and positive changes concerning environmental issues you have witnessed and are proud of since you started your mission to protect and preserve our planet? And also, I was wondering, you decided to go vegan in 2013. Can you elaborate on some of the environmental benefits veganism entails, as well as personal benefits you may have experienced?
Okay.
I like the second one, because the first one, I think we've pretty much covered it here on stage.
Yeah, you know, there, by one estimate from Paul Hawken, there are now 2 million NGOs around the world. Most of them very small at the local level, who are in one way or another addressing this crisis. The fact that there has been this grassroots emergent movement to solve the climate crisis is the single most positive development I've seen. And as I mentioned earlier, the emergence of these incredibly promising technology trends that make it possible for us to really and truly solve this crisis. We get over the resistance from the legacy polluting approaches, then we have the ability. As for veganism, I really don't proselytize or promote this, because I respect and deeply understand that diet is a very personal decision and everyone approaches it differently. And if you think there's resistance to switching to electric cars, for example, you just take a steak away from some of my friends and see how that goes. But
you're not a political vegan. It's a
well,
personal
I made a decision 5 years ago to experiment for 30 days, and it made me feel better. So I decided to stay with it. Now, you ask, what are the environmental benefits? There are, of course, benefits, and the increasing meat intensity of diets in developing countries is a non-trivial source of extra global warming pollution, because of the simple equation that it takes 7 to 8 pounds of plant protein to make 1 pound of animal protein. And some of the current prevailing ways of pursuing animal agriculture are associated with large methane releases, and what used to become fertilizer becomes toxic waste, and the conversion of forests for new feedlots and so forth. Done properly, animal agriculture can play a very responsible and healing role when integrated with organic, no-till, sustainable agriculture techniques. And again, I think there is a movement in that direction as well.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one more question. Yes, please. Maybe in the back. Shall we give the people in the back the possibility? I see a lady all in the back. Yes, I think she'll get it.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would like to pass the microphone to my husband.
What'd she say?
She's going to pass the microphone to her husband.
I'm very proud of my wife.
I saw 2 hands in the air. That's a clever move. Wife. Congratulations.
I did not write my question down either. Vice President Gore, what are your hopes and plans for the upcoming COP23 climate conference in Bonn? My first question, and have you looked at the potential of blockchain for innovation with respect to climate action?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I will be at the Conference of the Parties held in Bonn, sponsored by Fiji, by the way, with the assistance of the German government, and I'm looking forward to it. It will be an important conference. The one next year will also be important because that will be the beginning of the first 5-year review period for the Paris Agreement. But the one next month will be extremely important, and I'm looking forward to it. Where blockchain is concerned, your question is an interesting one. Many people know about Bitcoin. Fewer people know that Bitcoin is just one somewhat controversial manifestation of an underlying technology called blockchain, which has the ability to really be one of the most important digital innovations of the 21st century. If you were going to make a list of the 5 most important digital innovations in the last 2 decades, blockchain would definitely be on that list. And its potential, not only in the field of climate, but in almost every field, for securing information, for introducing much higher levels of efficiency and information transfers, and including financial transfers. It is now being sorted, and it's so revolutionary that it's going to take a period of trial and error to find out some of the difficulties in implementing it. And I probably shouldn't go much more deeply into it, but I'm a big fan of the blockchain technology and the opportunities it offers.
I think that covers it, because I can literally not think of an intelligent follow-up question to blockchain.
Well,
phenomenon.
Let me say one other thing,
Yes.
if I could. I hope that those of you who are here as part of this event will experience the exchanges here not just as a performance or an effort to entertain or to satisfy curiosity. I hope that you will consider experiencing it as an opportunity for you personally to become a part of the solution to this crisis. We need everyone. Switzerland is moving very positively in the right direction, but every nation can do more. And in some ways, Switzerland is now leading the world. According to some measures, the most competitive economy, very high standards for the development of public policy. So what you do really matters, not only for your own country, but for the world as a whole. And as I mentioned in an earlier exchange, the only remaining question here, we're going to win this, but there is the remaining question of how quickly we will win it. You had the tragedy in Bondo just 6 weeks ago, complicated cause and effect chain, but you have already experienced these consequences in many, many ways, the snow cover, and I won't go into them all. But the opportunities I've referred to are also very present here. And the opportunity for Switzerland to demonstrate the right path forward and provide inspiration for the world. You can make a difference. And for anyone who thinks that we don't have the political will to accomplish this, just remember that political will is itself a renewable resource. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think so. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Mr. Al Gore, thank you so much.